Matt Keister here on our little tour of the Kennebec River here. We're at the site of Cushnoc in Augusta. We'll walk over here, built on the Kennebec River. You can see Fort Western there in the background. All right, but Cushnoc, as you see right here, this rock is put here to commemorate that, was the original trading post built by the Plymouth colonists to help pay their debts. So we know that the fur trade, the beaver trade, was very, very lucrative during this time period. So Cushnoc was built in 1628 by the Plymouth colonists as a way to help repay the debt. It was a forward trading post here on the Kennebec with the Abenakis, the Taconics who were above us here, the Nardswalks, the different tribes that were on the Kennebec system. And it provided a source of income other than what they could provide in Plymouth. But this area here was the forward trading post. Now, in order to understand why the colonists were so interested in trading for beaver, we just simply have to look at this price of goods from 1703. How much an actual beaver fur was worth and what it actually traded for during this time period is pretty amazing. So it's easier to see the value of beaver skin when we look at this list right here. You could buy 10 pounds of salted pork for one beaver skin in season, a pint of shot, right? A pound of gunpowder, right? It's amazing when you think about it, the value that beaver skin had during this time period. Beaver pelts were the currency of the day, the currency. And because of that, that's why the Cushnoc post was developed where it was, and eventually later to protect those business interests, Fort Western. Fort Western was that it was built in 1754 at the start of the French and Indian War. So here it's a museum that's maintained still today for public use. It's the oldest wooden fort in the United States, and it was in use until it was garrisoned until 1767. It was never attacked. But it was also the forward supply base for the furthest most base in land, which was Fort Halifax, which was 17 miles further up the Kennebec. Now you have to remember, the English and the French at that point, in 1754, were in competition for North America. That was the beginning of the 7 Years' War. And they were worried about an attack coming down from Quebec through the Kennebec system. And Fort Western that you see here, all right, was one of the defenses against that. So the wooden palisades are still there. The old block houses on the corners are still there. You can see the block houses inside. So here, which is another reason why Fort Western was built here, why Cushnoc, the Cushnoc trading post was built here, is that this water is tidal all the way to this point. The tide goes in all the way up there just around the bend. Right? So essentially way in kind of in the background here, you can see some old gray stonework. That was the Edwards Dam built right at the tidal point. It was removed in the 1990s. This was the head of navigation. This was the point where ocean-going ships came and stopped and had to turn around. From here on up, it was going to be shallow draft boats, necessitating the need for bateaux. Now, there's another piece of the puzzle. So when Arnold looked at Montresor's map, right, that map was drawn by an engineer who had traveled by canoe. So the Native Americans who were used to the great carrying place, who were used to moving inland, used lightweight birch bark canoes. They did not use bateaux. Bateaux were much heavier, harder to portage over the difficult spots, whereas a birch bark canoe was lighter and quicker. And what we have to remember was Arnold's army was moving with military equipment, cannons, paymasters' chests, right? Ammunition, gunpowder, stores, everything that was required for an entire army of 1,100 men, medical supplies, right? So that was part of the difficulty, was that they needed the boats that could carry that stuff. Canoes might not have been capable of doing so, at least at that time. So also, remember, the Native Americans were used to moving very light in comparison to the Europeans. That was another piece of the puzzle, right? They understood how to negotiate that great carrying place all right, where Arnold was not aware of the difficulties that laid ahead of him.